Hello everyone, this is part 4 of What If Deku Married Mina, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Mina was almost singing as she entered her house. She had come home from her date last night in a good mood, but that was nothing compared to how she was feeling right now. Kicking off her shoes, she practically skipped out of the entryway into the kitchen. "Mom, I'm home," the pink girl called out as she checked the cabinets for something to eat. It was about 8:30, and she was feeling a little hungry. She moved about the kitchen like a dancer, twirling and skipping as she hummed to herself. Mina had anticipated experiencing a great deal of surprises while at UA, but a romantic relationship was not one of them. Not that she was complaining, of course. Izuku Midoriya was her boyfriend. That single thought had been continuously running through her head ever since their conversation atop the tree. She must have mentally told herself those words over 100 times now, and they still filled her with absolute glee. Eee. She squealed with delight, unable to contain herself as the realization hit her once again. "Someone's in a good mood tonight," a voice came. Mina turned to see a woman with similar eyes to hers standing in the kitchen doorway. "Mom." Mina felt her cheeks burning up. How long were you?" "Half a minute or so, but who's counting?" The woman said with a wink. Unsurprisingly, Mina looked a lot like her mother. Like Mina, her hair was naturally curly, though unlike her daughter she wore it at shoulder length. Also unlike her daughter, Mina's mother had brown hair. In fact, aside from her eyes, she looked like a completely regular human. No pink skin, no horns, nothing. "Oh." Mina awkwardly shuffled her feet a bit before grabbing an apple from a bowl next to her. "Another late night?" Her mother sounded slightly more serious. "You were studying with a friend, right?" The tone in the older woman's voice suggested she didn't exactly believe that was what Mina had been up to. Mina nodded rapidly. "Yes, I swear." Her voice sounded slightly panicked. Her mom folded her arms. "All right, that." The horned girl fidgeted a bit, unsure of how to explain herself. Should she just be upfront about her new situation? "Okay, look, I totally stud with someone today, and yesterday. But, I may have done a few other things too." She gave a big, sheepish smile. While she hadn't actually been grounded, she wasn't sure if her mom would be happy knowing she had spent of her time goofing off instead of working on her grades. The brunette stared at her daughter with a stern look for a few seconds. Suddenly, she seemed to relax, putting a hand on her hip and giving a sly smirk. "What's his name?" Mina's eyes went wide as she nearly dropped her apple. She fake coughed a couple times. "What are you talking about?" Her cheeks were turning lilac. "You're not being very subtle about it, dear." Mina's mother's smirk grew. "2 nights now you've come home after spending all day with a friend, acting like the happiest girl on the planet." She walked over to the shorter girl, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I was your age once, Mina, remember?" One know the signs. Her smirk turned into a grin, very much like one of Mina's. "Besides, I'm your mother, it's my job to know these things, sweetie." Mina looked away slightly. "Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya." The horned girl couldn't help but smile as she said his name. "Midoriya?" Mrs. Ashido ed her head. "Haven't I heard that name before?" "He's in my CL." She paused. "He was at the sports festival. You know, the guy who fought Endeavor's son?" Her mother gasped. "That green-haired boy?" The one who nearly tore himself apart in that fight? Mina's entire family had been amazed by Izuku's perseverance and heart during that match. Somehow, she wasn't very surprised to hear that Mina had taken an interest in the boy. "Yeah, he's kinda reckless like that when he wants to be. But he's actually really shy. And super sensitive. And kind. And pianate. And," Mina caught herself starting to gush about her boyfriend, and blushed. "Sounds like a keeper," her mother teased. Mina got her wit from someone, after all. "Well, I certainly look forward to meeting him." It was evident Mrs. Ashido had no issues with her daughter dating. Preferably before you leave for camp. No telling what you kids might get up to there. Mom. Mina's whole face changed color. The long-haired woman laughed. Only kidding, dear. She winked. But really, I'd love to have him over sometime this week. Just say when. Her daughter's face slowly turned back to its normal pink shade. I think I'll wait until Dad gets home this week at least. I'd rather have Izuku meet everyone at once. Mina's father would be getting back from his trip in about 3 days, and she had a feeling it was going to take at least that much time for Izuku to muster up the courage to visit her home anyway. The acid quirk user felt her phone buzz. She pulled it out of her pocket, seeing who messaged her. Is that him? Her mother asked in a teasing voice. Mina's blush answered her question. Well, I'll stop pestering you about him. For now. With that, she exited the kitchen, going back to whatever it was she was doing. Mina sighed as the brunette left. She had been planning on telling her mother about Izuku tomorrow, so having to talk about it now had caught her off guard. Still, she was glad to get it off her chest. She'd have to tell her dad when he got home. Biting into her apple, she began typing back to Izuku. Their date had ended, but she was more than eager to keep talking to her green-haired cutie. Ooh, my little Izuku's growing up so fast. Izuku struggled to breathe as he was caught in his mother's hug. He had gotten home around 9, and after being questioned by his mother about where he had been, the boy decided to tell her about Mina. He hated hiding things from her, and now that he knew where he and Mina stood, he felt much more comfortable talking about her. And talk about her he did. He admittedly said far more about her than he intended, but he couldn't contain himself when he started. There were so many nice things to say about her, after all. His mother's reaction had, as expected, been very emotional. This was evidenced by the death grip she currently had her son in, as well as the waterworks soaking Izuku's clothes. Inko Midoriya had been ecstatic just to learn her son was making friends at UA. He hadn't really had any most of his childhood, so hearing that his new clemates were treating him kindly was an enormous relief to her. But this ? Inko could hardly handle it. Knowing someone out there cared about her little Izuku after everything she'd seen him go through filled with her with an immense amount of joy. Mina Ashido, this kind-hearted girl her son had described, sounded like the most wonderful person in the world right now. You need to introduce me soon, got it? She released Izuku, keeping her hands on his shoulders. Gee, got it, Mom. The quirk inheritor recovered his breath as she spoke. He yawned. It was almost 9:30, and he had had a very busy day. I'm going to head to bed, okay? His mother nodded, letting go of him fully. Good night, Izuku, she said as he walked towards his room, grabbing another tissue to wipe her eyes. Night, Mom. A few minutes later, Izuku was lying in bed, having brushed his teeth and changed into his pajamas. The lights were off, though his face was being illuminated by the light from his phone as he typed. Sorry, just finished talking to my mom. Oh ? How did she take it ? Well, she really wants to meet you now. Shortly after, reluctantly, saying goodbye to one another at the train station, Izuku had found himself texting his new girlfriend. He didn't have anything specific he wanted to say to her, but he just hadn't wanted to stop talking. They had chatted over the last hour and a half about a few random topics. Around 8:30, Mina had let him know she told her mother about their relationship. Or rather, her mom had figured out that they were in a relationship, apparently. This was actually what prompted Izuku to tell his own mom right away, rather than waiting. He'd rather not get surprised like Mina had. It was incredibly nerve-wracking, of course. He had a hard enough time telling himself he actually had a girlfriend now. His mom's reaction was about what was expected, but that didn't help diminish his anxiety in any way. Still, he was happy to know it sounded like both of their mothers were supportive of them dating. Dating. Just saying the word made Izuku blush a little. To think that just a few months ago he was questioning if he was going to make any friends at UA. The concept of being in a relationship had never even crossed the boy's mind. Who would want to date someone like him? After all, his brain had filed that idea away under impossible long ago. Even before receiving One for All, Izuku figured he had a better shot at becoming a hero than dating someone. But, much like that faithful day with All Might, the impossible had suddenly become possible. Izuku still didn't know what to fully make of it, honestly. He was obviously overjoyed to be in a relationship with Mina, but that didn't change the fact that he had no idea what he was doing when it came to this sort of thing. He had zero experience in the realm of romance, after all. How did one learn how to be a good boyfriend? It's not like there were clues he could take, or a book he could read. He should know, he had looked it up. At the very least, he was very certain about what he thought about Mina. Everything he had been feeling about Mina the past few days had amplified. Just thinking about her for long enough put a smile on his lips and a blush on his face. He gingerly touched his left cheek, recalling the kiss the pink-haired girl had left there, and sighed happily. He would try to be the best boyfriend he could be, if nothing else. Mina deserved no less. His fingers continued to move as he typed another message to the girl. He was tired, but he couldn't bring himself to stop texting her. A few hours later, Izuku was fast asleep, phone still clutched in his hand with a message half-typed on the screen. Izuku never got tired of the feeling of a shower after a tough workout. After feeling tired and sore from exercise, the hot, steaming water was incredibly relaxing. It felt so nice he would sometimes stay under the water for nearly a half hour, despite only really needing about 5 to 10 minutes to get clean. If he was in a particularly good mood he might start singing, though that was only if he knew for sure that his mom wasn't home. Today wasn't such a day. The green-haired boy decided he had been soaking long enough, and stepped out of the shower. He breathed in deeply, savoring the refreshing, clean feeling he was experiencing after being drenched in sweat. A few minutes later he was dried off and dressed, ready to take on the rest of the day. It was about 1 o'clock, which was unusually late for Izuku. Normally on his days off from school, he'd be out of bed and done with his morning workout by about 10 or 11. However, the aspiring hero had a bit of a late start today, namely due to the fact that he had stayed up much later than normal. Mina was the cause of this, of course. They had ended up spending hours texting one another last night. In fact, Izuku wasn't really sure what time he fell asleep. All he knew was that he had legitimately paid out in the middle of typing out a message, demonstrating just how tired he had been. He had never had a conversation last that long, text or otherwise. Thinking back, it was hard to remember what they had even talked about. They had discussed so many topics, it all seemed to blend together. Heroes, school, their friends, each other. They spent a lot of time talking about each other, hobbies, you name it. Izuku was half asleep for a lot of it, which might explain why he was having so much trouble remembering things. Come to think of it, he didn't recall if they had made any plans for today. Stepping out of his room into the hallway, he began scrolling through the very long list of messages he and Mina had sent each other. At some point, it seemed the topic came up, though no concrete plans were made. However, one exchange of texts got Izuku's curiosity. You gonna be home tomorrow? Mina had asked. I think so. I don't really have anything planned beyond my morning routine. Cool. He had asked her why, but she simply changed the subject. Before he could ponder the cryptic exchange any further, a knock was heard at the door. Izuku, could you get that please? Inko's voice came from the kitchen. Walking over to the door, Izuku checked through the peephole to see nobody. Thinking it may have been someone dropping off a package or something, he opened the door. Within seconds a pink blur came hurtling from around the corner and practically tackled him. It took him a moment to register who it was. Suddenly, those texts made sense. Hiya, Izu. Mina's cheerful voice greeted as she ensnared her boyfriend. Izuku's brain went haywire. Mina. She was here. At his house. What are you doing here? He struggled against her grip a bit before she released him. She was wearing an outfit fairly similar to the one she had yesterday, and had her school bag with her. Well, that's a silly question. I'm here to see you, duh. She had a huge grin on her face. Izuku was shaking as his entire face turned dark red. Mina put on an exaggerated pouty face. What? You're not happy to see me? No. Of course I am. Izuku held his hands up, smiling despite the extreme anxiety he was feeling. I just, how did you even find my apartment? You, dummy. She poked his chest. You told me your address last night, remember? Pulling out her phone, Mina brought up the message in question. See question mark. Izuku blinked a few times to make sure he was reading things right. Sure enough, he in fact did send the pink girl his address. Very late at night. I always have trouble with these sorts of places. Ended up knocking on the wrong door, like, 3 times before this. Izuku quickly put it together. Why you intentionally waited until it was late to ask me this, didn't you question mark? The mischievous girl put her hands behind her back, whistling as she looked up. Maybe, she admitted, looking back at the boy with a sly smile. Izuku gave an exasperated sigh. This girl was going to drive him insane. Well question mark. What question mark? Mina put a hand on her hip. Aren't you going to invite your girlfriend inside question mark? She raised an eyebrow, asking as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Just hearing the word, girlfriend, made Izuku feel like he was going to faint. Oh, alright, please. Won't you come in question mark? He nearly tripped as he repositioned himself, making space for his guest to enter as he gestured inside with an arm. Mina giggled, tussling the green mop on her boyfriend's head. So cute, was all she said as she entered. Naturally, this line and gesture turned Izuku into a stammering beat. It only got worse when a third voice joined the conversation. Izuku, who's at the 2 students turned to see Inko Midoriya standing in the hallway, her hands covering her mouth as she stared bug-eyed at Mina. The aforementioned girl gave one of her usual smiles. Hiya, you must be Mrs. Midoriya. I'm Mina Ashido, she greeted enthusiastically. The older woman responded with a muffled squeal of joy before pulling Mina into a hug. Whoa. It's so good to meet you, she cried, releasing the struggling girl after a moment. There were tears in her eyes as she spoke. My son had so much to say about you last night. Oh question mark. Mina turned to look at Izuku, who was trying to hide his face at this point. Really question mark like what question mark? A smirk appeared on her face as she watched the flustered boy squirm. Mom. Izuku more or less squawked. Can we talk about that later please question mark? Relishing on her son's embarrassment, Inko decided to oblige him. I must say I'm surprised to be meeting you so soon though. I thought Izuku would have told me you were coming over. Well, he didn't exactly know. I kinda wanted to surprise him. The girl rubbed the back of her head. Sorry if I'm being a pain. Nonsense. In fact, I was just about to make lunch for us. Would you like to join question mark? Mina's eyes sparkled with delight. Really question mark thanks, Mrs. Midoriya. I'd love to. The woman smiled at the horned girl. Right this way then, she exclaimed, walking back into the kitchen. Mina returned her attention to Izuku once they were alone. Dude, your mom's a mashingung. Evidently free food was a surefire way to win Mina over. I can see why you're such an emotional sweetheart now, she teased, clapping him on the back. Ha, thanks, Izuku muttered. He hadn't fully recovered from the fact that Mina was in his home. In truth, he actually wasn't sure how okay he was with the idea. Not that he wasn't glad to see Mina, of course, she was honestly all he could think about these last couple days. But at the same time, this felt a little too personal to him. Their relationship had developed incredibly quickly, but Izuku had hoped that things might have slowed down once the two of them had decided to become a couple. Things had escalated that much due to the two of them trying to figure out their feelings, now that they had, moving that quickly almost felt unnatural to Izuku. Neither he nor Mina had any experience when it came to romantic relationships. Sure, Mina admitted to having a crush or two and flirting here or there, but she had never come close to a serious relationship with someone. They were both pretty well out of their element, and seemed to be taking it in different directions. Izu question mark, Mina's voice came. Relishing on he was probably standing there mumbling all this to himself, Izuku shook himself from his thoughts. Sorry, he cleared his throat, forcing himself to loosen up a bit. I see you have your school's Mina stuff, did you want to do some studying after lunch question mark? That was the idea. Unless you had something else in mind question mark, he did not like Mina's tone as she said that. I mean, with your mom home I don't think. Izuku made what sounded like a distressed bird call as his blush came back, earning another giggle from his girlfriend. Kidding. Now come on, I feel bad not helping your mom if she's gonna feed us. She grabbed the human tomato's arm and pulled him along towards where the kitchen was. Izuku sighed to himself. He was going to need to bring up his concerns to Mina soon. Mina could add, having an awesome mom, to the long list of things that made Izuku such a great guy. Mrs. Midoriya immediately took a liking to the upbeat pink girl that had decided to visit her home. Despite coming to see Izuku, Mina found herself mostly talking with Inko for the majority of their lunch. The woman wanted to know all about her son's girlfriend, and said girlfriend was more than happy to oblige. Mina in turn learned much more about Izuku's home life, including some very embarrassing stories only a mother could know. Izuku had initially protested his mother divulging such information, but soon resigned himself to the teasing Mina was almost hurriedly going to put him through later. He did draw the line at his mother showing baby photos, though, much to Mina's disappointment. Once lunch was finished and the dishes were all put away, Mina and Izuku decided to settle down and begin their study session. But not before Mina insisted on seeing her boyfriend's room. Is that really necessary ? Izuku stammered as she brought up the subject. I mean, we could just study right here, or on the couch. But I wanna see your room. The horned girl whined. Come on, what's the big deal ? She feigned a surprised gasp. Unless, you've got something you don't want me to see ? Izuku opened his mouth to speak, knowing full well where she was going with this. Are you hiding something naughty, Izu ? No. The green-haired boy shrieked, his face burning up. It's nothing like that. I wouldn't, I don't. He let out a huge sigh as he hung his head, knowing full well his girlfriend was just teasing him yet again. You're not going to stop unless I show you, are you ? Nope. Mina yawed him, flashing a toothy grin with her eyes shut. She was having too much fun with all this. Alright, fine. Izuku was almost certain this was a huge mistake, but he wasn't sure how much longer he could take Mina's antics. Also, why are you calling me, Izu, now ? Because it suits you. It's short and cute, just like you. This line combined with a hug turned Izuku's face at least 8 different shades of red in less than a second. Despite that, he couldn't help but smile as he felt that warm, fuzzy sensation in his chest once again. He may have not have been that comfortable with Mina's surprise visit, but there was a part of him that was enjoying it regardless. He cared about Mina, after all, and every little flirtatious comment was just a reminder that she cared about him just as much. It was why, despite how awkward it made him look, he didn't ask her to stop. Hey wait, I'm taller than you though, he pointed out. She didn't seem to hear him. Getting up from the dining room table, Izuku led his companion back to the entry hall and over to his bedroom door. Mina stifled a laugh at the All Might-themed sign on the door. Taking a deep breath, he reluctantly turned the doorknob. He clamped his eyes shut as he slowly opened the door. After a few seconds of silence, he hesitantly opened one eye. Mina was staring at him, a mild smile plastered on her face. Dude, she shook her head. You are such a fanboy. All Might posters on every wall. All Might action figures on every desk, drawer, and table. All Might comics cramming the shelves. Heck, there was even an All Might rug on the floor. To be honest, Mina wasn't surprised. Izuku tried to think of something to say. I know, it's weird, he was well aware of how unhealthy his All Might obsession could look. Weird ? You kidding ? It's super cool. The pink girl entered the All Might shrine that was Izuku's room, marveling at the collection of merchandise. Some of this stuff looks really old, must have been tough to find. She took note of a particular figure that was still in its box. Hey, I think I recognize that. Isn't it, like, super rare? Yes, it was a limited edition kind of thing made for a comic. There were only 100 made, Izuku explained, walking into his room as he talked. See, it's the costume he wore during Astonishing All Might number 84 in that one flashback scene on the 32nd page, and, he trailed off as he noticed the blank stare Mina was giving him. Yeah, it's really a figure. Fanboy, Mina whispered. She noticed the set of weights tucked away in the corner of the room. Ooh. Well, a hero needs to stay in shape, right ? Mina walked over to the weights as he spoke. Holy crap, 25 pounds. ? She cried as looked one over, glancing back at Izuku with a mischievous grin. Just what have you got hiding under that shirt, Izu ? Her eyebrows waggled, a gesture that instantly turned her boyfriend into a blubbering mess. Feeling even more flirty than usual, she slowly walked up to the boy, who was of course completely red. What a why you? Question mark. He couldn't even finish his question, he was so flustered. Come on, let me just take a peek. She winked. While the flirt had no intention of actually making Izuku take off his shirt, playing with him like this was amusing her to no end. Of course, she wouldn't mind getting a look, something told she was really going to like what she saw. Hurrah question mark. Coherent words were no longer in the blushing boy's vocabulary. Mina drew closer as he tried to process what the heck was going on. Just one peek. Pretty please question mark. The gap between them was only a few inches wide now, so she spoke softly. Her heart was starting to beat a little faster. Something in the back of her mind told her she should stop this, but she tuned it out. We should. Izuku's breathing was growing more rapid as his heart rate accelerated. We should what question mark. Her grin turned devilish. You and me, alone in your room, what should we do? Question mark. She leaned in closer. And was promptly moved back. Mina, stop. Izuku had hit his limit and, almost reflexively, pushed Mina away from him. Both students were momentarily stunned by this sudden outburst. Izuku recovered first, looking a little regretful. I'm sorry. He paused to let out a loud sigh. Finding the right words was difficult. Look, this is all a bit too much for me, he started. Don't you think we're moving a little too fast question mark? Mina finally reacted, going from a shocked expression to a more somber one as he spoke. We just started dating, and you're already showing up at my home, in my room, and... Stop. His girlfriend held up a hand, signaling him to be quiet. Her shoulders slumped a bit as she too sighed. I understand. Looking back, Mina was astounded she hadn't expected something like this. She had devised her little scheme to show up unannounced at Izuku's place last night, never once thinking about how he might react. She knew he'd turn into a blubbering tomato man, that's what she was counting on, in fact. But she had gotten so caught up in her excitement over having a boyfriend that she completely forgot to consider his feelings on the matter. She was overflowing with adoration for the boy, and it had blinded her somewhat. She felt like an idiot for not noticing the signs. Izuku had been even more awkward than normal this whole time, and not necessarily in a good way. Thinking about it, he had looked downright uncomfortable. How had she not seen that question mark? She had been treating him like a boyfriend first, and Izuku second. Had she ruined things between them with this little stunt question mark? I'll just head home, if you want. Mina honestly felt a little disgusted with herself. Izuku shook his head. No, it's alright, really, he started. He hadn't meant to upset her. No, it's not. You're absolutely right, I did take things a bit too far, again. She turned to leave, but a hand grabbing her shoulder made her stop. Please wait, Mina, Izuku's pleading voice came. I'm not saying I don't appreciate it. The girl turned her head to look at him, confused. I know you're just doing all this because you care about me. His eyes moved down as he said this, a small blush and smile creeping on his face. And that means so much to me. But, he looked back up at his girlfriend, who had now fully turned around. I'm just worried that if we take things too far too soon, he trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. His words seemed to cheer Mina up a bit. She placed a hand over the one on her shoulder, rubbing her thumb along it gently. Yeah, I get it. She chuckled softly, slowly shaking her head. You're so damn logical, question mark. A shy smile appeared on Izuku's face as he looked away slightly. Alright, she paused. We'll just take it nice and slow. There was a warm, gentle smile on her face. It's kinda like a candle, question mark. Mina raised an eyebrow as Izuku spoke. If it burns too much too fast, it runs out. But if you keep it under control, it lasts and, relishing on how ridiculous that just sounded, the green-haired boy put his free hand over his face. Mina couldn't contain her laughter. What is it with you and these weird comparisons, man question mark, she joked, pulling him into another hug. It was a much gentler hug than the others, one Izuku found himself being fine with. Our relationship is a candle, you dork. Her boyfriend said nothing, simply completing the embrace. After holding her for a few seconds, he suddenly felt the urge to further show his appreciation for the girl in his arms. Before he knew it, he had turned his head and planted a small kiss on her cheek. Pulling away slightly, Mina gave the now red-faced boy a sly look. What was that? Mr. Let's Minaslow things menus down ? Izuku avoided her gaze. Haha, it just felt right ? Well if you get to do that, I get to do this. She leaned in, placing a slightly longer kiss on the boy's cheek. She could feel the heat radiating off his face. The two of them each had butterflies in their stomachs as they looked at one another. Mina started to laugh for no particular reason. Izuku soon joined in. There was nothing particularly funny about the situation, but they laughed all the same. Okay, maybe we can at least try to get some studying in now, Mina suggested once they calmed down. Let's go back out to the oop, hold on. The feeling of her phone vibrating distracted the acid quirk user as she checked it. Looks like my friends are meeting up for something. She looked back up at Izuku, grinning. But I should really study. Actually, the boy's response was somewhat surprising. I think you should go with them. Huh ? Mina blinked a few times. Well, we sort of both blew our friends off yesterday. Actually, we've sort of been doing nothing but seeing each other for last few days. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. Maybe that's why things escalated so much. Mina tilted her head, thinking. Oh man, you're right. It had been a little while since she had really spent time with her friends. Oh, I know. You should totally come with. The suggestion completely caught her boyfriend off guard. See come again ? Yeah, you haven't really gotten to know any of them, right ? Well, maybe Suyu, but not the others. Besides, maybe spending time together with other people around will help us out a bit. Like Izuku said, part of the reason Mina hadn't really thought about how fast their relationship was moving could have been the fact that they had spent most of their free time alone together for the past couple days. Well, yes, but, Izuku was torn. On one hand, it sounded like fun, and his girlfriend had a point about it being good for their relationship. But on the other hand, it meant they'd have to tell her friends about said relationship. Unless they tried to hide it, which he doubted they could do even if they tried. Was he ready to be public about this ? He had told his mom, but that was a little different from his claymates. But then again, they were Mina's friends. They had a right to know, didn't they ? Besides, it was inevitable that the whole CL would find out one way or another. At least by doing this he could control when some of them learned about it. Plus, it was a good reason to talk to more of his claymates. Yeah, sounds good, he finally decided. Mina beamed. Great, I'll let em know you're coming. She started typing. Wait, unless you don't want me to ? Izuku shook his head. I'd rather they know ahead of time. Really, neither situation was good in Izuku's eyes. Her friends would either spend time theorizing on what the two of them were doing together before they arrived, or would bombard them with questions when Izuku randomly showed up. But he'd rather not be put on the spot. Still, he was glad Mina asked. Gotcha. Well, let's get moving then. The pink-haired girl made for the door, motioning for Izuku to follow. They made their way out of the room, putting on their shoes in the entry hall. Mom, Mina and I are heading out to meet some friends. Izuku called out. Okay, have fun you two. Inko appeared from the kitchen doorway. And Mina, please feel free to come by anytime. You're always welcome here. You got it, Mrs. M. And thanks again for lunch. She waved goodbye to the woman as she and Izuku headed out the door. She turned to him as they made their way to the exit of the complex. Seriously, dude. Best mom ever. She's really a mashingung, yeah, Izuku agreed. She really liked you. He paused. Just promise me you'll let me know next time you come over ? Mina held up a hand, sticking out her little finger. Pinky promise. She looked rather proud of her double entendre. Her companion stared at the finger for a second before he understood what he was supposed to do. Holding his own pinky out, they locked together. For now, anyway, she added with a wink. They continued on their way. It was late afternoon, and the train station was bustling with activity. Stops were packed with workers either leaving for or returning from lunch breaks, students that still had school this week heading home for the day, and people simply out for the day. Among the crowds, a group of 4 familiar teens sat around a table at a small cafe, keeping an eye on one of the platforms as they talked. Come on, Suyu, you don't actually believe that? Kaminari leaned back in his chair with his hands behind his head, said to his frog-like friend. I mean, Midoriya ? Seriously ? We're talking about the same guy here, right ? For once I actually agree with him, Jiru noted, one earphone in her ear as she sat leaned forward with a hand supporting her chin. I mean, I know she was with him the other day but still, I just don't see it. Didn't you guys see how funny she was acting on the last day of CL ? Suyu asked, squatting on her chair like, well, a frog. It's Mina. She's always acting funny, Kaminari joked. Well yes, but more than usual, Ribbit. Well, given what happened to her the day before, I'd be surprised if she didn't act strange, Jiru pointed out, shuddering a bit as she recalled the mall incident. True, but she was looking over at Midoriya a lot at lunch. Suyu turned to the group's 4th member. Didn't you see that too? Kirishima ? The redhead, who had been quiet this whole time, simply shrugged. Can't say I remember, was all he said. The amphibious girl simply stared at him for a moment, though her expression was as unreadable as ever. Look, I'm just saying that Midoriya is not Mina's type. Like, at all, Kaminari continued the argument. Like, they're complete opposites. Plus, even if she does like him, it's Midoriya. Can you really imagine him dating someone ? Jiru laughed a bit as she spoke. He's a nice guy and all, but I can't see them as anything more than friends. You guys are acting like you know the guy. Kirishima spoke up, nodding over at Suyu. She's the only one here who's talked to him that much. The other male in the group looked at him with an eyebrow raised. What? You actually think she's right ? You think they're a thing ? Didn't say that. Just saying, you two are making a lot of umptions about the guy. I still think it's nuts. In fact, tell you what, Suyu, Kaminari turned back to his long-haired friend. 2,000 yen says they're not together. Ribbit ? Suyu hid her head. Kirishima had to stifle a laugh. You heard me. You on ? Are you sure about this ? The frog girl asked. I feel bad just taking your money, Ribbit. PFFT, sure, whatever. Jiru, Kirishima, you want to get in on this ? The electrification quirk user looked at his other friends. Thanks but no thanks, Jiru declined the offer. Kirishima flashed a sharp-toothed grin. Yeah, sure, why not? 5,000 yen says they're together. Everyone turned to look at him. Come again ? Kaminari's eyes were opened about as wide as Suyu's. Why not ? I'm feelin' lucky. The blonde gave him a strange look, then smirked. Sure, but you better be ready to pay it forward. He held out his hand, shaking Suyu's and then Kirishima's. Internally, Kirishima was laughing hysterically. He almost felt bad doing this. Almost. He wasn't surprised Suyu had caught on that Mina had feelings for Izuku. She had always been a very observant person. She didn't seem certain about it, though, suggesting she hadn't actually talked with the pink friend about it like he had. Oh hey, look who's here. Jiru pointed towards a train that had just stopped. Sure enough, the topic of the group's conversation had arrived, and were just stepping onto the platform. Mina gave her friends an energetic wave while Izuku, slightly behind her, offered a much more timid one. As they approached, Kaminari smirked. See ? If they were dating they'd be holding hands or something. Knew it. Ignoring him, Kirishima waved to his childhood friend. Afternoon, guys. The cheerful pink girl greeted her friends. Sorry we're a little late, got a bit unlucky with the train schedule. Don't sweat it. Kirishima turned to look at the green-haired boy next to her. Midoriya, how's it going, man ? Izuku, who had been clearly trying not to draw any attention to himself, struggled to make eye contact with the spiky-haired redhead. Hi Kirishima. I'm doing fine. Izuku glanced around the table at the others, all people he knew and yet didn't know. Kaminari, Jiru, Asui. He nodded to each of them as he greeted. I thought I told you to call me Suyu, the bug-eyed girl reminded him. Oh, alright, Suyu. Sorry. Mina saw Jiru sigh to herself, frowning somewhat. Jiru didn't dislike Izuku per se, but she had always seemed somewhat annoyed by his often overly emotional behavior. Kaminari had a huge grin on his face for some reason. It's okay, Suyu said to the boy. By the way, are you and Mina dating ? Ribbit. Izuku's face went white. Everyone else turned to look at the frog girl, unsure if they heard her right. NNNNHG, Izuku looked like a deer caught in headlights as he failed to form words. He had been expecting this topic to come up, but not so soon, and certainly not in so direct a manner. Dude ? One think you broke him. Kaminari was trying, and failing, to hold in his laughter. Has anyone told you that you can be a little too direct ? Jiru asked, looking at her green-clad friend. Yes. In an instant, all attention shifted from Suyu to Mina. There was a bit of lilac in her cheeks, her arms crossed. Come again ? Kaminari had a look of utter disbelief in his eyes. Jiru seemed shocked too, though not quite as much. You heard me. Mina grabbed Izuku's hand. He and I are together. Right, Izuku ? She looked over at her boyfriend, who managed to snap out of his trance. I didn't think they'd ask so fast, he finally muttered, sighing. Kaminari's face turned from one of surprise to one of terror as realization slowly dawned on him. Wait, so you and Midoriya are. I believe the agreed amount was 5,000 yen, yes ? Kirishima interrupted, grinning devilishly at his friend. Don't forget my 2,000. Ribbit. The loser of the wager faceplanted onto the table, letting out a muffled groan. We ? See, this is why I didn't want to get involved. Jiru looked down at him, shaking her head. Mina and Izuku were utterly confused by the scene before them. What the heck, wait. Did you guys have a bet going about us ? Mina put her hands on her hips, glaring. He insisted, Suyu stated, pointing at Kaminari. He bet me 2,000 yen that you two weren't together. Then Kirishima bet him another 5,000. Mina looked at her old friend, narrowing her eyes at him. That's dirty. She returned her gaze to Suyu. Wait, you knew ? No, but it seemed obvious you liked him on our last day. She looked at Izuku, then back at the now blushing Mina. You certainly didn't waste any time. Hey. The pink girl's blush only deepened. Izuku was more or less hiding behind her at this point, covering his face with his hands. Alright, Kirishima held up his hands. We can talk about their love life later. We're gonna scare off Midoriya if we keep this up. He looked at Kaminari again. Well ? The blonde didn't look up, yet somehow managed to open his wallet and pull out Kirishima and Suyu's earnings. Thanks, buddy. Screw you. Izuku didn't think he'd ever get used to being the center of attention. Being the new addition to the group, it was only natural that all of Mina's friends wanted to know more about the quirk inheritor. He was bombarded with questions from all sides, only getting a moment to breath when something else caught their attention for a brief moment. Oftentimes, it was something Mina would say, clearly trying to help her boyfriend out. However, Kirishima also seemed to be aware of Izuku's uncomfortableness, and made sure to make everyone back off when their questioning got to be too much. Frankly, Kirishima was acting very differently from the rest of them. In fact, he hardly seemed to react when Mina had announced their relationship. Did he know already ? Despite being out of his element, though, Izuku was enjoying the company of his clemates. Mina's friend group had a very different dynamic from his, and being a part of it was certainly interesting. With the exception of Suyu, they all seemed to mock each other at any opportunity, though they thankfully laid off Izuku, for the most part. Mina, of course, made sure he was included in the fun, and as time went on the rest of the group felt more comfortable ribbing him as well. And frankly, Izuku was glad they did. Much like Mina's jabs, none of them were actually trying to insult him. Being included in the joking made the timid boy feel welcome. It made him feel like these people actually liked having him around, that they weren't just tolerating his presence because he was with Mina. After spending a little time talking at the station, the group had wandered around a few city blocks for a few hours, checking out various storefronts along the way. In that time, Izuku could honestly say he considered his new companions friends. And he had a feeling they felt the same. Currently, the group had stopped to get dinner at a beef bowl shop, and were all seated at a round table. Mina was, naturally, seated next to Izuku, on his right. Next to her was Kirishima, who was followed by Tsuyu, then Jiro, then Kaminari. And that's why my uncle is banned from the zoo. The table erupted in laughter as Kaminari finished his story. He is definitely your uncle, Jiro said between laughs. Yeah, he's Minashi, what's that supposed to mean ? A smirk was the only answer the punk girl gave her friend. Before they started squabbling, a server came by with everyone's drinks. As they left the table, Kirishima held up his GL, banging a spoon against it to get everyone's attention. I just want to take a second to congratulate our happy couple here, he announced, grinning. Mina and Izuku jumped a bit at this. How about it, guys ? The redhead held his GL towards the middle of the table. Deciding to go with it, the other three also held up the drinks. To Izuku Midoriya and Mina Ashido. They all clinked the glass together, the others giving small congratulatory remarks to the curly-haired couple. Naturally, all the attention had caused them both to change color, though they were still smiling. And to Denki Kaminari, for the easiest 5K I ever made, Kirishima added. Screw you. You totally knew, didn't you ? One want my money back. The blonde fumed. I have no idea what you're talking about, dude. Mina knew her friend was lying through his pointy teeth, but found the situation too amusing to speak up. I'll get you for this, you'll see. Shaking his fist at Kirishima, Kaminari gestured towards the pair on his left. But damn, seriously, after seeing you two together, I feel like an idiot, yes, Jiro, more than usual, for making that bet. He elbowed Izuku playfully. Turns out there's a lot more to Mr. Mumbles here than we thought, ? Like most of the group, Kaminari had reevaluated his opinion of Izuku quite a bit in the past few hours. Not that any of them had necessarily thought poorly of him before, but they hadn't exactly thought well of him either. Mr. Mumbles ? Izuku looked at his new friend with confusion. Kaminari had come up with a few nicknames for the boy, but that was a new one. It's because of your tendency to start talking to yourself, Tsuyu explained. Oh, I do that a lot? ? The green-eyed boy chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his head. Hey man, we're all weird here. Kaminari clapped him on the shoulder. I mean, look at who you're dating. Izuku's cheeks began to warm up at the mention of his relationship. Oh ha ha. Mina rolled her eyes. Speaking of which, the blonde leaned in close to Izuku, speaking in a low voice. Come on man, spill it. You and Mina do anything, fun yet ? After taking a few seconds to process the question, Izuku's entire face turned beet red as he literally leapt out of his seat. WH fart. ? He shouted, earning a few looks from other tables. Kaminari was snickering to himself, only to cry out in pain as Jiro slapped him upside the head. Hole, was all she said. Kirishima was trying to hold in his own laughter at the situation, while Mina was covering her face with her hands. Yoch. I was just kidding, mostly. Kaminari gently rubbed his head. Another slap. Alright, not mostly. Sorry. Izuku slowly returned to his seat, his face still a bit red. He liked Kaminari's laid-back attitude and quick wit, but found the electrification quirk user had a tendency to go a bit far with his jokes. And that he seemed a wee bit too interested in what Izuku and Mina were doing together. Izuku shouldn't have felt so surprised, he was friends with Mineta, after all. He looked at the girl next to Kaminari, who was now scolding him for his perverse attitude. The two of them seemed to make fun of each other more than anyone else did in the group. Honestly, he sometimes questioned if it was all just for laughs. Admittedly, Jiro was the one friend in the group Izuku had the toughest time getting along with at first. She had seemed somewhat annoyed by his awkward demeanor for a while, but eventually they found some common ground in musical tastes. Izuku wasn't nearly as knowledgeable about the subject as her, but he was able to have coherent conversation. Sorry about him. I think he's used his quirk one too many times, the earphone-wielding girl directed her attention to Izuku. Still, I will say he had a point. I thought you were kinda just a weird nerd with a weird quirk. She paused. I mean, I still think you're that, but that's not all you are. Just mostly. Thanks question mark. Compliments from Jiro tended to be weirdly backhanded. And he's my weird nerd. Mina threw her arm around Izuku, pulling him close, a huge grin plastered on her face. Izuku's response to the gesture was as expected. Due to their talk early that day, Mina had tried to tone down her displays of affection a little, especially in public like this, but she simply couldn't help herself sometimes. Izuku had accepted that he couldn't ask Mina to stop completely. Nor did he want her to. That reminds me, I've been wanting to ask you guys something, Tsuyu spoke up. How did this all start, anyway question mark, all eyes were on the pair once again. Yeah, I've been wondering that too, Kaminari added. No offense, but this whole thing kinda came out of nowhere. Izuku and Mina looked at each other with slight concern. They hesitated to say anything, neither being sure if it was okay to divulge information about that day in the CL room. They had both displayed a lot of personal feelings to each other that day, after all. Well, Mina broke the silence. See, she shuffled back and forth in her seat uncomfortably. Izuku remained silent. Alright, that's enough, Kirishima chimed in, dissolving the sudden tension in the air. You're asking for some pretty personal stuff there, Tsuyu. Mina and Izuku each breathed a sigh of relief at their friend's ist. I guess you're right. Sorry, you two, the frog girl apologized. It's okay. I know how you are, Tsuyu. Mina smiled to indicate she wasn't upset about it. You're just too blunt for your own good sometimes. Ribbit. Izuku had already known Tsuyu more than he had the others, so he already knew what to expect with her. Direct, observant, and mature were all the things that could appropriately describe the amphibious student. To be honest, she almost felt out of place with the rest of the group, Izuku included. Kirishima almost seemed like the group's big brother. He'd always rein Kaminari in when things got too rowdy, or speak up when someone was starting to make Izuku feel a bit overwhelmed. Of course, he still joined in on the fun. Izuku was almost certain the spike-haired redhead had known about his and Mina's relationship ahead of time, though. Did she tell him already question mark he'd have to remember to ask her later. After a few more minutes of talking, everyone's food arrived, which they promptly dug into. The evening wound down pretty quick after dinner. Jiro needed to head home once the group had finished to pack for her concert trip the next day, and Tsuyu needed to go help her family out. Mina and the guys spent a little more time loitering around the city, but soon decided to call it a day. I'll catch you guys later. Kaminari waved goodbye to his friends as he split off from them at the train station. Hopefully I'll be seeing more of you, Midoriya. Definitely. This was a lot of fun. Izuku nodded. But, do you remember what Mina and I asked question mark? I know. I'll keep a lid on it about you too, no worries. The blonde gave a thumbs Minasup as he spoke before walking off. The couple had requested the group keep quiet about their relationship with the other members of their CL, so they could let everyone know at their own pace. The trio walked through the station for a bit longer before Kirishima found his stop. He said goodbye to his friends, leaving the two of them alone. Well, that was a fun day, Mina said as they waited to stop together. She needed to ride the same train as Izuku for a bit before changing lines before his stop. Sorry if my friends were a bit of a handful. Oh no, they were great. Izuku insisted, holding up his hands. They're energetic, though, yes. But I'm really glad I decided to come. Izuku couldn't possibly be upset about making new friends, even if they did make a habit of making fun of him. I am too. They really seem to like you, so I'm sure we could do this again sometime. That'd be nice. The freckled boy paused. But, I had a question. Mina looked at him. Shoot. This is going to sound silly, but, Izuku cleared his throat. Did it seem like Kirishima already knew about, well, us question mark? His pink girlfriend stared at him for a few seconds before looking away, sighing. He did. No point in hiding it, she figured. See, I may have told him about my crush on you before our first date. She stopped for a moment. Okay, it was more like he confronted me about it and then I told him. Oh, Izuku couldn't imagine talking to anyone about Mina before he had asked her out. Heck, he felt nervous talking about her with other people now. Funny thing, actually, he was the one who suggested I ask you to help me study. She smiled sheepishly. The plan was to slowly get close to you and ask you out when it seemed appropriate, but you kinda threw that out the window. Izuku felt his face begin to heat up as he recalled his incredibly tactless attempt at asking Mina out. But, I'm glad you did. Mina smiled warmly at her red-faced boyfriend. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened? For all we know, things would have gotten too awkward if we dragged them out. It was a strange thought. It had only been a few days, but each of them was already having a difficult time imagining not being with the other. It wasn't long before the train arrived. They continued to talk about their eventful day as they sat together before arriving at Mina's stop. Giving a quick goodbye hug to her boyfriend, the horned girl stepped off the train before it continued on its way. The following day was fairly uneventful for both Izuku and Mina. They decided not to spend the whole day together like they had been doing, opting to each take a day to just relax at home. The last several days had been quite eventful, after all, and they wanted some downtime. Mina had attempted to get a little studying done on her own, reviewing the topics she had already gone over with Izuku. At some point, she decided to try learning some new material on her own, though she wasn't too confident in her ability to do so. Izuku had been her guiding light, and without him she was certain she'd just get lost and confused. This proved to be a correct assumption. However, the pink student was surprised at how far she was able to get into a chapter before calling it quits. It was a struggle, but she was able to make sense of more than she had expected. On top of that, she hadn't stopped out of boredom or lashingness like she used to prior to finals. Her study time consisted of a few minutes of reading followed by an hour or two of games or movies. She couldn't help but smile at this. It was a sign that all this time learning and reviewing with Izuku wasn't a waste. She was getting better, but she still had a way to go. Izuku, meanwhile, mostly spent the day helping his mom around the house and starting his preparations for the camp. He found that there were still quite a few items he was missing that were needed for the trip, mainly due to the fact that his last attempt shopping for them had been cut short. He and Inko decided to pick the remaining items up together. Unsurprisingly, Mina was a frequent subject of conversation for the two of them. Mrs. Midoriya wanted to know more about her son's girlfriend, and Izuku was more than happy to talk about her. The following day, Izuku received an invitation to see a movie with Ida, Todoroki, and Uraraka. Deciding it would be as good a time as any to tell his friends about Mina, he invited her to come along. Unfortunately, Mina was spending a good chunk of the day helping her mom run some errands, so he was on his own. Great. The All Might fanboy was in deep thought as he walked down the street towards the theater. He had every intention of telling his friends about his relationship, but without Mina there he was feeling way less confident about the matter. When should he bring it up? How should he phrase it? Should he wait for someone to ask about her? Ida at least knew they had spent some time together, even if he hadn't suspected they were on a date. Maybe I'm overthinking this, Izuku muttered to himself. He tried to picture what Mina would say if she were here. Most likely she'd agree with that statement, and tell him to just bring it up when the time felt right. He'd probably question what that meant, and she'd probably say something like, "You're smart, Izu, you'll figure it out." She'd say this with one of her trademark smiles. The kind that made Izuku's heart flutter just seeing it. Knowing him, he'd probably get a little flustered by the compliment and smile. She would, of course, find this cute and say so, which would just make him even more flustered, causing her to. Izuku found himself blushing in real life as he realized he might have been taking this hypothetical Mina conversation a little too far. He put a hand over his mouth, trying to hide the smile that had crept its way onto his lips during those thoughts. He really was hopeless when it came to romance. Arriving at the theater a few minutes later, Izuku quickly spotted his friends standing around outside. Uraraka was the first to stop him, staring at him with an expression Izuku couldn't quite place for a half second before cheerfully waving to him. Ignoring the odd look, the quirk inheritor joined his fellow heroes' menus and training. "Hey guys," he greeted. "Sorry, were you guys waiting long?" "Not really," Todoroki informed him, shaking his head. "We only arrived a few minutes ago." "Good to see you, Deku," Uraraka greeted back with a smile. "You've been kinda MIA the last couple days. I was starting to get worried something happened." She laughed. Yeah, sorry about that guys. I've just been kinda busy." Izuku debated just dropping the news right away, like with what happened yesterday, but decided against it. Mainly due to his own nerves. Ah yes, I remember you told me you were helping Ashido study. I imagine that has been taking up a good deal of your time, Ida said thoughtfully. He smiled. It is pleasing to see you are still committed to assisting a fellow student like. I hope this won't take too much time away from that. Oh no, Mina's actually busy today, so. Izuku cut himself off as his brain caught up to his mouth. His eyes went wide as he realized what he had just done. 1. He had just confirmed that he and Mina had been spending multiple days together. 2. He had just called Mina by her first name. Something he never did with anyone, even his close friends. Todoroki seemed to catch this as well, raising an eyebrow. Ida mostly just looked confused. And Uraraka looked. Her posture looked a bit more rigid than normal, and he noticed her fists were slightly clenched. There was a strange expression on her face. She had a distant, unfocused look in her eyes, like she was staring through Izuku instead of at him. What exactly was going through her head? Midoriya, are you alright? Ida, the concern in his voice clear, asked. Yeah, I'm fine. Izuku's voice was louder than he intended it to be. Are you sure? You seem distressed. His much taller friend didn't intend to drop the subject. Distressed? WH, what are you talking about? He trailed off, sighing. Why was he so worked up about this? Okay, look, I have something I want to tell you guys. As much as he wanted to wait, now was probably the best time to let them know. He took a deep breath as he let his courage build up. It's about Min, Ashido and me, Guys, we're gonna miss the movie. Uraraka suddenly interrupted him. In an instant, her bizarre expression and body language were replaced with her usual demeanor. We better hurry up and get inside. The brunette girl didn't even bother waiting for the others as she entered the theater. She's right, it is almost time. Apologies, Midoriya, you'll have to tell us after. Ida followed his sword friend inside after saying this. Is she acting strange to you? Todoroki suddenly spoke up. Izuku looked at the quiet boy. Why you noticed too? The dual-color-haired student nodded. It's weird, she almost seems upset, but, at the same time, not. Well anyways, what was it you were about to say? Izuku coughed. We should really get our tickets, he suggested, avoiding the question. All the wind had been taken out of his sails, and he needed some time to build up the fortitude to talk about Mina again. Besides, he wanted to tell everyone at once. Todoroki decided not to press the issue, and entered the theater with his friend. Let's see, if I were the spices, where would I be? Mina was currently wandering the aisles of a grocery store, on the lookout for spices and seasonings. She was currently with her mom and brother getting shopping done, but had split off from the two of them to go on her own adventure. Before long, she had found the section she was looking for. Checking the list her mom had given her, Mina approached the shelves holding the various containers, picking out the ones that had been written down. Alright, chili powder, chili powder, chili powder, chili, aha. She moved a finger down one of the shelves before finding her target. There were two different brands side by side, one priced a little higher than the other. Shoot, which one did she want? The horned girl double-checked her list to see if her mom had specified a brand. No such luck. Alright, what's the difference here? She muttered to herself, grabbing both containers and looking them each over. She was so distracted by comparing the chili powders that she didn't notice the person that had been standing behind her. Okay, so you're more expensive, but why? Maybe. For fuck's sake, would you just pick already? Mina stiffened as a familiar voice growled at her from behind. Just go with the cheap one, there's barely a goddamn difference between them. Reluctantly turned her head to see none other than Katsuki Bakugo standing behind her, looking more than a little impatient. He was holding a basket that had, surprisingly high-quality food items, Mina noticed. The explosive student seemed to just realize who he had been waiting behind. His eyes widened ever so slightly, then narrowed again, making him somehow look even more annoyed than before. Bakugo didn't know this girl that much. Hell, he couldn't even remember her name. He recalled recruiting her for help in the sports festival, but that was about the only noteworthy thing that she had ever done that came to mind. At least, until what had happened a few days ago. Looking at this weird pink girl, Bakugo began to recall his run-in with her on the last day of CL. Apparently, she was Izuku's friend now or something, and had gotten on the blonde's case about how he was acting towards the freckled boy. It pissed him off. Bakugo didn't really care much for any of Izuku's friends, but they at least knew to keep out of shit that didn't concern them. This girl ? She was different. Mina's eyebrows furrowed. She wasn't any happier to see Bakugo than he was to see her. She hadn't learned the full story behind his relationship with Izuku, but she heard enough to know he was, among other things, a Mive scumbag. This wasn't exactly a surprising revelation, of course. Even before speaking with Izuku, she had questioned how a guy like him had gotten into UA's hero course more than a few times. But now, knowing this boy, this hero in training, had tormented someone for being supposedly quirkless made her blood boil. To Mina, one of the defining traits of a hero was standing up for those who could not stand for themselves, and Bakugo had done the exact opposite of that. Instead of inspiring hope, he had attempted to crush it. The agitated girl felt her hands ball up into fists. He was no hero. If anything, he had more in common with a villain. The hell you staring at, raccoon eyes ? The hothead snapped, deciding to force his way past her to the chili powder. Out of my way, damn it. He pushed her aside with a little more force than necessary, grabbing the ingredient before turning to leave, not wanting to stay there any longer than he needed to. Hey. Despite her stern voice, he didn't stop walking. Hey hole, I'm talking to you. He grit his teeth at this, but didn't acknowledge it. A few seconds later he felt a hand on his shoulder before being forcefully turned around to see a glaring pink face. Who the fuck did this girl think she was ? Don't fucking touch me. Bakugo shouted, careful not to subconsciously generate explosions with his basket-holding hand. What's your goddamn problem, huh ? You. Jack. A finger jabbed his chest. His eyes twitched. The fuck did I just? Just what the hell is your problem with Izuku, huh ? She was aware she was entering a minefield here, both figuratively and literally, but she needed to know. Bakugo didn't say anything for a few seconds, scowling at the black and yellow-eyed girl. Why the hell did she care about that ? My problem ? He scoffed. He exists, that's my fucking problem. Mina rolled her eyes. Shut up. Look, I know how you treated him before UA, alright ? She crossed her arms. Seriously, who the hell do you think you are acting like that to someone who didn't even have a quirk ? Because you knew he couldn't fight back, huh ? Is that it ? The more she talked, the more pissed off Bakugo got. Izuku had fought back, time and time again, despite being quirkless. It was one of the reasons the explosion quirk user detested him so much. He didn't know his goddamn place. And apparently, neither did this girl. And now that he has won and is here at UA with you, you still treat him so horribly. Why ? What the hell did he ever do to you ? Bakugo recalled all those times his old friend had looked down on him. How that green-haired bastard would always try to help him with things when he didn't need nor want it. Like that time in the stream, for instance. Mind you damn business, extra, that's what he did, was all the boys said though. As far as he was concerned, this girl was a complete stranger, and had no right asking about this kind of stuff. Mina put a hand on her hip. Well, as Izuku's girlfriend, I'd say that it's kinda my business. Silence followed this statement. All the anger had left Bakugo's face, being replaced with genuine shock and surprise. Mina couldn't help but smirk at the reaction she'd caused. For once, he seemed to be at a loss for words. It only lasted seconds, of course. Mouth twisting into a scowl, his eyes flashed with newly kindled rage as he tried to comprehend what he just heard. He somehow looked even worse than before. Or, what's wrong ? Mad Izu's getting some before you ? Obviously their relationship was nowhere close to that level, and even joking about it nearly made Mina blush, but she couldn't resist trying to anger the jerk in front of her even more. Sparks crackled from Bakugo's hand. Fuck you. This was all the short-tempered boy said before turning around and storming off. Hey, you never answered. Ugh, fine. Fuck you too. Mina called out as he left, holding a middle finger out to him for emphasis. Whipping around, she stomped back to the spices, grabbing the more expensive bottle of chili powder and slamming it into her basket. Despite her snark towards the end of that conversation, the pink girl was positively fuming. More than ever before, she wondered just how someone like Bakugo could have gotten into a place like UA. How anyone could look at him and think that he could actually be a hero. Not my business ? Like hell, she grumbled as she looked over her list. She had avoided asking Izuku about Bakugo, not wanting to stir up any bad memories, but she was starting to feel it was the only way she was going to find out just what happened between them. Bakugo was a bully, yes, but there was clearly a bit more to it than that. She had dealt with plenty of bullies, and they rarely if ever harbored that much animosity for someone. She had everything her mom wanted her to grab, but she decided to take a lap or two around the store before returning so she could cool her head. What was wrong with her ? Why did she feel this way ? Where was this coming from ? Dozens of questions had been flying through Uraraka's head as she tried to focus on the movie playing in front of her. She glanced to her right for what felt like the 100th time, looking at Izuku for a half second before returning her attention to the screen. He was in the furthest seat from the zero-gravity girl, with Ida and Todoroki sitting between the two of them. Uraraka wanted as much space between her and Izuku as possible, and had intentionally picked this seat because it was the furthest from him. She didn't know why she wanted to avoid him, only that she did. She had found herself thinking about him from time to time over the past few days. Ever since the day she and her friends had gone to the beach, she couldn't keep him out of her head for long. Him and Mina. Thinking about them caused a surge of emotion to well up inside her. She gripped the arms of her chair, squeezing her eyes shut as she tried forcing the ugly thoughts making their way into her head to leave. The brunette was no idiot. She was pretty sure she knew what was going on between the two of them. And for some reason, it upset her. She had no idea why it upset her, nor did she like the fact that it did. Izuku and Mina were her friends, and she should be happy for them if they were dating. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake these negative thoughts for long. Anger, stress, sadness, resentment, and other things she couldn't explain all thrashed around inside her head alongside more positive feelings whenever she thought about them together. It was why she had cut Izuku off before he could tell everyone about it. She wasn't sure how she would react to actually hearing the news from the man himself. It sounded silly, but it was what made her do it. Taking another look at him, she found that the curly-haired boy was staring back at her, clear concern on his face. Gasping lightly, she snapped her head back towards the screen. She didn't look back at him the rest of the film. It was definitely enjoyable, but I think I still preferred the first one, Ida said, finishing his critique of the film as he and his three companions exited the building. Same, Todoroki agreed, nodding his head. Hopefully the next one will be better. Indeed. The tallest member of the group turned to Izuku. Anyways, Midoriya, I believe there was something you wanted to tell us earlier, yes ? The shorter boy froze mid-step for a moment. Huh ? Oh, right, he swallowed. He had been expecting this to come up as soon as they finished the film, but it still caught him slightly off guard. Still, there was no reason to delay any longer. Alright, so, IW wanted to tell you guys that I'm DA. Oh hey, what was your guys' favorite part ? Mine was the Uraraka. I believe we should let Midoriya finish before continuing to talk about that. Ida interrupted his female friends interrupting, nodding at Izuku to continue. The green-haired student looked over at Uraraka. She had tried cutting him off again. Why ? The brunette, relishing she wasn't going to stop this, decided to brace herself. Anyways, me and Ashido, we're Izuku couldn't stop his blush. Dating. As expected, everyone was quiet for a beat. Todoroki was the first to speak. Oh, he didn't sound any different than usual. Is that all ? The son of Endeavor's non-reaction shouldn't have really come as a surprise to Izuku. Ida seemed to be in deep thought. Well, it is certainly unexpected, but nonetheless I am happy to hear you have found someone, Midoriya. A sheen covered his glaze as a more serious look appeared on his face. However, I hope this relationship will not negatively affect your performance in CL. No, of course not, Izuku insisted, somewhat intimidated by the bespectacled boy's intensity. That's great news, Deku. Uraraka forced herself to smile as she put on a cheerful voice. Oh, hang on. She reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. Hello ? She turned away from the group, her facade fading. I'm out with some friends, why ? She paused. Huh ? Really ? Are you sure it can't wait ? Another pause. No, it's fine, I'll be home in a bit. Sighing, she hung up, placing the phone back in her pocket. Sorry, guys, she said, turning around. Something came up and my family needs me home. Is everything alright ? Izuku asked, clearly worried about whatever had happened. Uraraka smiled. Oh, it's nothing bad, don't worry. But they need me home as soon as possible, so, I'll catch you guys later. She waved goodbye before walking off at a strangely fast pace. Congrats again, Deku. Really. As she left her friends behind, the girl felt a single tear fall from her eye. Nobody had called her, of course. She just needed to get away before she let her emotions get the better of her. She hated this feeling. Why couldn't she just be happy for them ? What was wrong with her ? She needed to avoid Izuku until she could figure out what the problem was. Do you like him ? Aoyama's words during the final exam appeared in Uraraka's head, stopping her in her tracks. That couldn't be it, she told herself before she kept walking. Izuku was her friend, possibly her best friend, but that was all he was. And clearly that's all he ever would be. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.